Welcome to Total Apex Sports. This is the fourth and goal. I'm Andrew with our Bears beat writer Cody and our Steelers beat writer Zach. But we're gonna get right into it with some trade rumors that are going on with the deadline now, week 9 instead of week 8. I mean, first of all, I think that was like a good move, but uh, second, we've been hearing like names like Cooper Cup specifically for tonight's game. You know, back healthy. That the Rams are potentially willing to offload his contract and send him somewhere else. What do you think about the whole Cooper Cup thing, Cody?
I personally think it's noise. There's also been some speculation about
Okay,
Matthew Stafford possibly getting dealt to a
yeah,
team that could really use a veteran presence at quarterback. I don't think so. And the thing about the NFC West, that division is still pretty wide open. The 49ers have bad
right,
losses against the Cardinals and a couple other teams. And it's just like, it's no longer that juggernaut, 49ers or Rams and everybody else. It's still anybody's game over there. So I think the Rams are going to stay competitive. And you don't do that by dealing your best players. So for me, it's noise.
That is a great point because it's the competitiveness of the Rams that is making all of this interesting, especially in the Pittsburgh. We're like, come on, Rams,
we're
just
gonna
keep
cut.
losing because we want Cup. I mean, it's a pie in the sky, but that's an excellent point. That I think the Rams smell the blood in the water with the 49ers. That there's a dent in the armor there that wasn't there before that might open this up. And I agree. If they're getting rid of Cup right now, you're gonna have to pay a king's ransom so they don't feel it as much. And no one's gonna do that for a guy who's played what 23 games in the last 3 years.
Well,
Yeah,
and
he's
here's
been
the other
pretty.
thing too. I mean, we're rolling into Thursday night football tonight, right? We're going to talk about that game here shortly. So I'll start us off. Let's watch out for this Rams team coming off a bye week. All right, we're playing in Los Angeles. You got the Vikings coming in off of a just brutal loss at home to the Lions. That's a game that they coulda, shoulda, woulda won, but the Lions took it away from them right at the end. That game took a lot out of that entire coaching staff, the entire roster. Like now they're rolling into a road game on a Sean McVay team coming off a bye week. He's pretty dang good coming off of buys, isn't he, fellas? So watch out.
Yeah,
This could be a trap game tonight for the 5-1 Vikings. And if the Rams are competitive in this game tonight and they win, the trade rumors end tonight. If they lose, they're going to carry on until the deadline on November 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern. So I think we can watch the game tonight with a little bit of excitement, knowing what we know about Sean McVay's teams coming off a bye. The Rams are getting healthy. They're getting offensive linemen coming back, key pieces to that run game. Kyron Williams playing lights out. They're starting to get Blake Corum going a little bit. They're getting a little bit more depth. And you got Puka Nacua possibly playing tonight,
yeah.
as well as Cup. And on the other side, TJ Hawkinson, right? So there's a lot of storylines tonight to make this game interesting.
That's a good point. And the Vikings tonight is an interesting point because this year's been easy for me to divide who has watched football for more than 20 years and who hasn't. Anyone who is taking the Vikings seriously, I know hasn't watched football for at least 20 years or more because I'm like,
Oh
this is
no.
every year. You have the Chiefs who, they're struggling, but they're going to be one of the best teams in the league. And the Vikings have to prove that they're not just a 5-0 team that's going to be 5-5 in a couple weeks. Every single year there is a team that storms out, and everyone's like, "Oh, where is this coming from?" And then they lose a game, and then they lose another one, and another one, and another. And if the Vikings lose tonight, I genuinely feel that's what's going to happen, and we're going to see possibly a 5-6, 5-7 Vikings in a little bit because they didn't learn how to win. You have to learn how to win
Yeah,
in this league because if you don't do that, when you lose, you have no idea what's going on. This Viking team, I genuinely believe, started to taste a little bit of their own product and they liked it. And so tonight's going to be big. If they win, it's going to be a lot. You're going to have to really, really look at the X's and O's to see what kind of Vikings team this is. I don't trust this Vikings team. I really, really don't. And the Rams could take advantage of that tonight. Great, great point on that, Cody.
Oh, and
yeah.
you're on point with it too, right? It's just like with the Vikings kind of loving their own brand a little bit there. everybody thinks that their mama makes the best Kool-Aid. And right now, it's the Vikings mamas, and people are slurping on that Kool-Aid, and it's delicious if you're in Minnesota. But they're going on the road to Los Angeles, and this is a team that's going to be hungry, and it's going to be fun to watch tonight. Andrew.
Yeah. I will say I think the difference maybe is like their defense, like Brian Flores, like his defense has been very stable this year, and yeah, they've had I think basically either a top two or top three defense the entire season, and like they made Aaron Rodgers look like a rookie in London the other day, but I guess yeah, it's going to be interesting just because like how they can handle another tough offensive opponent, like how they did with the Lions, and then Jameer Gibbs just ran all over them and had a pretty big game, and Amon St. Brown and all their stars. But going back to the Rams, I guess I mean I'm interested with the Cup thing is because like I think the rumors are coming from like their own team. Like I think coming from the Rams, like I don't think other teams would state like, oh, like it's cup available and whatnot. Because yeah, there's some specific details on what they're looking for if they were to trade him. But yeah, I guess the other potential trade candidate is another receiver, Mike Williams, who is like their fourth guy now with Adams on the Jets. Um, do you think the Ravens and the Steelers are just gonna be in another bidding war for another receiver? Zach?
No. What, the Steelers
I don't know.
tried this already.
Yeah,
We tried the, hey, look, it's a guy with the wide receiver designation. Let's sign him. Literally anybody out there, just a collection of bodies, hoping that this amalgamation of people would form a wide receiver. And other than Pickens, it hasn't worked. Mike Williams is that. Mike Williams is another guy, and it's the closer we get to the deadline, the more Mike Williams is going to look like something else. He is not. He is not. Mike Williams is
Yeah.
not a guy that can change. He's not a compliment to a wide receiver one. This, anybody believes this, then that's dangerous. Don't. No.
It's
Omar Khan, if you're listening, run far.
it's not going anywhere. And you got to think about
yeah,
like Mike Williams has been in the league for a little while. He started playing football with Phillip Rivers, and then he went to Justin Herbert. Neither of those guys are slouch at QB. Then he goes to one of the best of all time with Aaron Rodgers, and he's still dropping balls. He's still running incorrect
yeah.
routes. He's an enormous human being. He's a large target, and he is a freak athlete. But beyond that, the football IQ, the nuance of playing professional wide receiver in the NFL, not there.
I think it's like he also doesn't have that much leverage because he signed on there to a 1 year deal. Like the Jets also don't really have an incentive to move him. Like they could just keep him there. Like why not? Like they could use he's basically Alan Lazard but without like the Rogers connection. They basically, but
And technically, Mike Williams, he's played less than Cooper Kupp over the last 3 years. But if you take this
yeah,
year included, he's played 18 games in the last 3 years, Mike Williams. So he hasn't
Yeah,
been on the field. And his last 1,000-yard season was 2021, and it's been a drastic downward turn since then. So dude is not one of those guys that gets better as he gets older. He hit that peak and fell off.
yeah, they're both kind of just pretty big injury concerns. So I don't see
Yep.
them getting the capital that they would want if they were to move on from them. But yeah, week 7 was it was kind of there's some surprising wins here, but it was mostly just injuries. We got Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, who I feel like the Mike Evans thing, like I feel Bowles should be getting more flack for that because he was already coming to the game with a hamstring. That was potentially avoidable. The Godwin one, I mean, it sucks, but they were trying to come back into that game. If they get another onside kick, they could have. And then Ayuk was just yeah, what a brutal year for him, but at least he got paid.
Yeah,
And
I don't want to put it too much out there because I'm not a fan of Schadenfreude, but there's a little bit of karma from the Pittsburgh side of it with Ayuk. We're like, you used us for a couple months. You made us all feel kind of stupid. Okay, this is what happens when you make people in Pittsburgh feel stupid. But I never want anyone to get hurt to that level. So, but it's the Godwin and Mike Evans to me are weirdly more impactful. I've watched Steeler games where in Steeler games we've lost two, sometimes three receivers. That's really, really hard to come back from. So I don't know how this is going to impact it long term, but that's the more damaging to me because the 49ers didn't seem to really know what to do with the people they had this year. For some reason, all of a sudden, they didn't know how to use their weapons right. So
yeah, I mean, it's just brutal that loss for Tampa Bay and losing two of their best players. I mean, how do you come back from that? You know, the Mike Evans injury, Andrew, you said, you know, he kind of had a little bit of a limp going into that game, but it was a huge game, right? And he wanted to play, and
Too.
you know, he got a touchdown and he got hurt on, you know, almost a second touchdown. So that's Mike Evans doing Mike Evans things there. The brutal nature of Chris Godwin's injury, though, it's sort of like you have one side that's saying, "Hey, this injury was preventable. This game was in the bag for the Ravens. They shouldn't have had their starters in there. It's just like, you know, cut your losses and go home." But they still had a chance, and it's not in their nature to sort of wave the white flag like that. So, from a coaching
Yeah,
standpoint, I think it's sort of kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't with leaving Godwin in there for an injury that brutal. But you got to feel so bad for like him, his family. I mean, he was going into a contract year, and he was probably going to get paid a huge bag of money, and now he has to think about this might impact the rest of his career. So fantasy wise, I mean, it's brutal. You know, like you know, Zach was saying the 49ers haven't really known how to use their weapons so far this year. You know, one team that has is the Bucks.
yeah,
And the one thing going for the Bucks that they have is their sort of second string receivers are pretty good, right? Like I'll talk about Sterling Shepard first, right? He has the college connection with Baker Mayfield playing for the Sooners. He's not the athlete he used to be, but he still like has that veteran savvy. He's going to play in that slot role, kind of take over the Godwin role. Like they could be a lot worse off without a guy like Sterling Shepard. And then Jaden McMillan, I mean, rookie, you know, third string, sort of third receiver coming out of Washington. You know, last year looked really good in the preseason. Like he's got some talent. And then Mike Evans is going to come back eventually, but you're talking about a receiver in Sterling Shepard that could have a role the rest of the season moving forward. So if you're a fantasy manager that lost Godwin and you haven't made any waiver claims yet this week, or he's still available, I mean, think about grabbing Sterling Shepard. He might not produce for a couple weeks, but coming out off of their bye, they have a real favorable schedule down the stretch, and Sterling Shepard could pay you some dividends.
and do not discount the scoring loss alone that you lose with Godwin and Evans. That's 11 touchdowns and almost 1,000 yards that you just lost for at least a couple games there. 11 touchdowns between two guys is a ridiculous amount of touchdowns. What, halfway through a season? And so I don't know how it's like kind of like when the Steelers lose Watt. You can't replace that. So how do you minimize that damage? And that's going to be a good coaching test for the Bucks. How do you minimize this damage? So I don't know if you
yeah.
can do it.
I know that they have McMillan, Shepard. They also have Trey Palmer. But I think they're gonna kind of do what we saw in that Ravens game, where they're gonna just use all three guys if they're healthy. You know, Bucky Irving, I think he missed a second practice, so he might not be available. But you know, they have Rashad White. He's gonna get tons of targets. He literally went from in terms of fantasy just like a droppable guy to like all of a sudden, oh, he's back to old Rashad White just because he's just gonna get all the receiving volume out of the backfield. And then also K Dotton. Yeah, he was basically. It seemed like the Ravens every time Kadon tried to catch the ball, they try to like just hit him as hard as they can because he's like right in the middle of the field. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see about that. Um, for the Niners, do you think we'll see if Debo comes back, but do you think Jawan Jennings is going to take that step forward, or is it more going to be like we're going to try things out with like Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowie and whoever else they have?
Yeah, I do. I think Jawan Jennings is going to have a role in this offense moving forward, and he still had a role when Brandon Ayuk started playing football. So he had that
Yeah,
huge game where he had 4 touchdowns against the Cardinals or the Rams, was it, for Jawan Jennings
yeah,
when
that's
the
right.
Niners were just depleted. And anyway, yeah, I mean he's got a little bit of an injury. He didn't play last week, but I do think Jawan Jennings, if you need a guy in fantasy that is sort of like a start in the like this week, next couple weeks, this week if he plays. I mean, Jawan Jennings, he's a guy that could have value there. Ricky Pearsall, he's still gonna has to get into game shape, work his way in. And as far as Debo, pneumonia, if he plays, you got to start Debo every week. But yeah, I think definitely Jennings is going to have a role in this offense moving forward.
I totally agree, but I'm wondering if the question should be a little bit reversed. And what again, I need to make sure, preface with a disclaimer, I am not comparing the 49ers to Matt Canada, so everyone knows. But I kind of feel
Interesting.
like when we had Matt Canada as that, I was like, it doesn't matter who we bring in. We don't know what to do with them yet. So let's fix that problem first. And then let's go. The 49ers have to fix the foundational problem that they don't have that we know what to do with all of our moving pieces that seem to be natural for the last few years. That there's a disconnect somewhere. So Jennings can step up, but other than him doing it all himself, the coaching staff, they need to all get together and say, okay, we need to be better than the players right now and give them something to do, because that's what worries me about the 49ers is it seemed to be this intrinsic assumed thing that, oh, the 49ers know what to do with every single moving play. Like about Michael Jansing, it was so good because he was doing and how it was supposed to work, and that's what made him do what he did. The 49ers were so good because every little piece knew what they were doing, and that's not the case this year. I'm not seeing that this year.
Yeah, I think against Dallas specifically, they're definitely going to go back to running the football with Jordan Mason, and then
Hopefully.
getting targets to George Kittle. Also, if he's healthy, because he's also dealing with the I think it's sprained foot or something. But yeah, it's the Brock Purdy's gonna definitely be tested this year for sure. Just the nature of how the season's gone, but. Yeah, we can go on to the yeah, we kind of talked about this a bit, but yeah, the Vikings Rams. I kind of I don't know. I know the Vikings like they could easily lose this game. And I think they're an away favorite. I'm pretty sure, but like
Yeah, they're
not
favored by
by
2.5 on the road. Yep.
yeah. That the Reds could. It's gonna be a close game though. But I think I still have to stay with the Vikings just because um, their defense has shown up more times than it hasn't, I guess. Um, but yeah, Cody, what else do you see from this game that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, the Vikings defense is for real unless they're playing the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions carved them up, running the football, throwing the football. I mean, Jared Goff, he set that crazy stat where he has more touchdowns than
Oh
incompletions through
yeah,
7 games. I mean, that's nuts.
yeah,
So, I mean, they're not world beaters. I love Flores as a coach for that defense. He fits that brand. He fits those players. It's kind of like it kind of reminds me of when the Seahawks back in the day had the Legion of Boom, and then once guys kind of started leaving, but they still had that really solid defense with all the framework, and they were called the Legion of Whom. It kind of reminds me of that. It's like those guys that are just kind of all buying into the scheme. They're all solid players in their own right. You got a couple big veterans, Harrison, and they're playing well. However, I think that this Rams offense can run the football well, no matter who they're
yeah,
playing against. and you get both of your top receivers back potentially for tonight, I think that's going to be a big impact whenever that report comes out here in the next couple hours if those guys are going to play. As far as like a betting game, I mean, 2.5-point favorites on the road. I mean, I would probably take that. I would take that, bet the spread on the Rams, and if that number dwindles, if we learn that Cup and Puka are going to go, I mean, there you go. It's money in the bank.
Yeah.
That's true. And Andrew, you mentioned about the Vikings defense, and the problem with the teams being number one defense is unless you are the 2000 Ravens or you're Dick LeBeau or you're the Giants there's normally the scoring is a really good stat, and either rushing or passing is a really good stat, and then one is your weakness. Rarely is it all three are there. And for the Vikings, pass is their weakness. They are 19th in pass defense. They are top 5 or top 10 in scoring and running. They are I think the second best team in rushing defense. They are allowing like nothing on the ground, but they can be thrown against. And the Rams like to throw. And they want to prove, I think, specifically in this game, look what we have, look what we're not going to give to anybody. So, because I think that with all the talk that Cooper Kupp has been hearing, he wants to go out and he wants to play well for the Rams.
Oh yeah.
Not to like put on an audition for another team, but for the Rams. And then if they win, for him to be able to say that. I think he's setting that up in his mind. But I'd be worried if I was the Vikings, and they need to focus specifically on being better against the pass, because that's a concern right now.
Yeah, we got a comment from Jordan, our giant beat writer. Yeah, like the Niners are cursed with the Madden curse. But yeah, the Rams are totally still in this division. Like I just didn't understand where the Stafford Cup stuff is. Well, Cup specifically, because that was like, I think Diana was out of the Athletic, like they were saying like, oh, they're willing to like move his, like willing to pay his salary, but then still move him. But it's like, I don't know. Well, it's definitely going to be dependent on this game for sure. But yeah, we're gonna also for this week we have Tua back and Jameis Winston starting for Deshaun Watson, who also suffered
Thank
a
goodness.
season-ending
Thank
injury.
goodness.
Yeah, that stock up for my David Njoku fantasy shares. But yeah, I think the interesting thing is like if Mariota does start for the Commanders, yeah, how is he going to do against the Bears defense? Because yeah, they've also been one of the top units this year, Cody.
Yeah, no, and we're all kind of waiting until we're not going to know if Jaden Daniels is going to play till probably Saturday. I mean, maybe even they'll draw it out if they can till Sunday morning. But I think the Bears need to be prepared either way, and here's why. I think that Cliff Kingsbury, he sort of runs that sort of college style ish pro offense that Marcus Mariota loves, that he ran at Oregon, that Jaden Daniels like acclimated really quickly to in this league, and they still have a top 10 offensive line. I think they're ranked maybe number 9 right now, and that was unexpected. So earlier, Zach, you asked, where did this Washington Commanders team come from? It came from right there, the offensive line.
Yeah.
They retooled it. They brought in a rookie who's been playing up to 50% of the snaps at left tackle. They had 2 big free agents that they brought in, new players, but they gelled. That coaching staff of the offensive line did an outstanding job. And when these guys run the football, they run downhill. And it doesn't matter if it is Daniels, if it is Brian Robinson, if it is Eckler, if it is Nichols. Like, these guys can run the football, and that is the biggest weakness of the Bears defense. You can run the football against the Bears. And so if they can control the clock and they can run the football against Chicago, they're going to have their hands full no matter who's behind center. So it's kind of sort of going to be a trap game-ish if Mariota plays. But I think the Bears understand themselves enough now after 6 games and a bye week that, hey, this is where they're going to attack us, and this is what we're going to have to take away. So they're going to be prepared no matter who's under center.
That's a great way to put it. The Bears understand themselves, because it really surprised me when I looked at the Bears. You think of the Bears, you think of, and my apologies to Chicago fans. You think of mediocrity right now. That's kind of what you think of when you think of the Bears are 4th in scoring, 7th in passing, 11th in rush, and 5th in overall defense. That's legit. I don't care what, that is a legit defense. And so that is, they cannot take that lightly. But for really quick, let's touch on the Jameis thing, because I cannot think of another situation. A fan, because my dad is a Browns fan, where an entire fan base is secretly hoping that somehow your starting quarterback will be taken out of that situation. And no matter how it happened. And when it happened, I didn't see, there was no panic. It was the opposite. There was relief in Cleveland. There was relief that even if we have to sacrifice more of our future, we're out of this. It was a rough situation from every sense, from the ethical sense, from the PR sense, from the I can't play football anymore sense. Jameis is in a wonderful situation that he can fully take advantage of, because simply he's not Deshaun Watson. That's all he has to be right now to be loved in Cleveland. And that's rare for that bar to be that low. And Jameis isn't a bad quarterback. He's a good quarterback. And a lot of people in Cleveland are suddenly excited because they got Nick Chubb and they got Jameis back. All of a sudden, those AFC North games in the second half of the season for the Steelers against the Browns don't look like what they did for me earlier.
I love your excitement for this, Zach. I really do. I love me some Jameis Winston. I think Cedric Tillman to the moon. I got a lot of thoughts about this, but hold the phone here. They still have one of the worst offensive lines in the league. So if they can't protect Jameis Winston, if they can't keep him upright, and if they can't get a push in the run game, this Browns team isn't going anywhere. But I, as well, am going to be optimistic about this, because you could feel it. Like when that Achilles tendon popped and balled up in Watson's calf, it was like the exact same time the fan base and the team like came to life, and we're like, oh, here we go. And it's like, as horrible as that probably sounds, it's just, man, karma, call it what you want. But man, I think it's going to be a night and day difference for this Browns football team.
Yeah, on the same week that Nick Chubb came back, he didn't look that bad. I mean, he wasn't like, they obviously managed his snap share and everything coming off of that that brutal injury last year. But I mean, I'm kind of as a Ravens fan, knowing their secondary, this is not the AFC North that we've grown to love. It's more just no defense basically. So we'll see if Lamar can find a way to win this game, because I think it will be like I think the Ravens are like 9-point favorites. I think they're pretty hot. Yeah, they're pretty high favorites. I don't know if I trust that, if I'm being honest. Just because like the Bucs could potentially covered last week, and then the week before the Commanders covered as well. I know it's like different offenses and everything, but it's going to be that game definitely gets way more interesting now without Watson.
And the secret winners of the Watson situation, HBO execs, who suddenly got really excited about the fact that they don't have to worry about the Deshaun Watson angle, and they get a better Cleveland Browns team. So both, because I guarantee in HBO they're like, how are we going to do this? How on earth? How do we approach this? Do we talk about it? Do we not talk about it? What? And now they're like, oh, thank goodness. Okay, just give me the Jameis script. We're ready.
Yeah.
So that to me, I'm trying to joke about it as much as I can, because I am legitimately worried about that aspect in the AFC North. I don't like that distraction, considering that the Steelers have a very low margin of error this season, that it's all about staying focused, all about that. I don't like the idea of the one thing Mike Tomlin has tried to avoid since it started, finally found a loophole to get him. He's hated AFC Hard Knocks since it happened. Since the moment it came into existence, Mike Tomlin has despised it, and he's not. So I'm genuinely worried about what that does to the Steelers when it does start.
Yeah. The other big notable comeback is apparently Tua is coming back for the Cardinals game this week. I'm assuming that the whole Dolphins offense should be fixed. Um, I'm kind of surprised, Cody, how, if you go into the year knowing that, as a offensive play caller, if you know that Tua is injury prone because he had been for his career, when you try to find a backup that would fit your scheme, and even if he didn't, I just don't understand how they haven't game planned around the guys they've had.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a head scratcher. I think oftentimes when you have players on your roster that take the spotlight away from, certain positions that always have it, such as quarterback, right? I mean, think about rolling into the season. It was all about Jalen Waddle. It was all about Tyreek Hill. It was all about Devin Achan just having these huge breakout years, and it was not really thought about okay, Tua, what's he going to do, and what happens if he goes down again? Not if, when, and
Yeah,
yeah. So that's sort of a shame on the front office in Miami issue. I could see them, trying to make a trade for a player right before the deadline, trying to bring somebody in that can help back up Tua, but I don't know. I think that this Miami team had a real wake up call with Tua's last injury, and they've kind of looked a little bit lost. They're not real great on defense as they have been in the past. Especially for fantasy purposes. Like last year and a few years prior, I mean, you could roll out that Dolphins defense as a top fantasy scoring defense pretty much week in and week out. Those days are gone. And it's just kind of like a vibe standpoint too. You kind of watch press conferences, you sort of watch body language on the Miami Dolphins sideline, and yeah, they get a pretty good matchup, I guess, on paper against the Arizona Cardinals this week for Tua's first game back. But I don't know about you guys, but I watched that late Monday night game when the Cardinals played the Chargers last week. I watched every snap of that game. And that Cardinals team, they play hard, and they play really hard on defense for their coach, Jonathan Gannon, who is a defensive guy. And so I was actually pretty impressed by that Cardinals defense. Yeah, they allowed, some plays here and there, some yards here and there, but they played hard, they hustled to the ball, and it was that next man up mentality. I don't think it's going to be this runaway Dolphins offense is back against this Cardinals team. I don't. I think the Cardinals got a win under their belt. They're going to build on that. They're going to go to Miami, and it's going to be a tough fought, close game. I think the Cardinals are going to come out of Miami with a dub.
I agree. And the only thing about the Dolphins that I think about this is I want to think about football. I want to think about the strategy. All I think of, I can't do anything but see it from a human perspective because I just remember the fallout. I remember the amount of family members. I remember the amount of football players that came out and said, Tua, you need to stop, please. And the fact that it's just going to go back in, and because it's football, it's not going to probably be brought up a lot during the game. They've probably been told, please don't talk a lot about it. I don't feel like this young man has a very long leash as far as his future as a functioning person right now, because I remember I was watching the game live when oh goodness, I'm blanking on the name, and it's good, the Steeler player that got hit, and Ryan Shazier, and when I saw him lying on the ground and I realized his legs weren't moving, and I told my family, like, this is different. I remember that moment. I remember the fallout. I remember what it does to a team. And if Tua takes that hit and it looks different, that's what I don't want. And that's the only thing I'm thinking of right now, because it's going to happen. I don't think it's a when, it's an if, it's a when right now with Tua. And I don't care how big your helmet is. I don't care what kind of padding is right now. Every single time this kid steps on the field, he's taking his life into his hands, and I can't see football when I look at him now.
Yeah, I think he just has a lot of money on the line, and I think he came out saying he's not going to wear the Guardian cap. I mean, in terms of that, there hasn't been that much data to back it up, but at the same time, I don't know, I would for sure, maybe for 1 week, take that precaution just because this is it was it's been 4 weeks, and Yeah, it's not even like, oh, he has to like run less. Maybe they can script some stuff where the ball comes out quicker. Like he's gonna get hit in the pocket. Like it's gonna happen. Like there's nothing you can do to protect yourself in that way. So yeah, it is
Yeah.
a pretty big risk for sure.
Yeah, it's wild. I haven't done any research on this. I don't know if Tua's married. I don't know if he has kids. All I know is, he's of Polynesian descent and comes from a big family. And I mean, Zach, think back to like Troy Polamalu and like guys that have been on the Steelers and how like ingrained football is in that culture and how important it is. And it's the field of battle. I mean, you got players doing the haka, like coming out on fields, and like it's wonderful to watch. I love how entrenched football is in their culture. But man, I just it's going to be brutal to watch. There's not going to be anything any announcer can say. There's not going to be anything a coach can say in a post game press conference. If he gets hurt again and it's ugly again, I mean, everybody is just going to be like, why? Why? If he's not going to stop himself, who is going to stop him? If his family's not going to stop him, does the team stop him? I even had my wife ask me, like, hey, like, can the commissioner like stop a player from hurting himself? And it's just there's so many layers and business decisions and things like that. It just gets real muddy. But man, it could get ugly. So I think the whole nation's going to be watching with bated breath for not just this week, but if it keeps going. And man, you hope for the best for him, but yeah, if I was the Dolphins front office, man, I'm trying to plan for the future here.
And Andrew, you brought up a good point. My last thing I'll say on this is I'm wondering. I'm not assuming. I'm wondering if what happened is if this break, if Tua spoke to the front office of Miami and found out that his money wasn't as guaranteed as he thought with this injury. I think that's what I think. If he would have found out that all the guaranteed that he was set, that his family was set, I honestly think that might have made a difference. I think he found out that a lot of what he needed to set his because I think everyone has a number about what do I need to hit. I don't think he's anywhere close to that yet, and I think that's playing into this a great deal, Andrew. Money is unfortunately a big point.
It's got to be. I mean, what other reason is there besides pride?
Yeah, I heard that his contract, a lot of the guaranteed money isn't until next year, apparently, because even when I was looking at some like early mock drafts, and like even Dolphins beat writers, they're like, yeah, like even if Tua doesn't get hurt again, and even all the best case scenarios, like they would still be considering spending a high pick on a quarterback, like regardless, just because like they're trying to like double dip, like they've done that in the past with like, oh, their secondary is like terrible, then they bring in like Jalen Ramsey and draft a corner in the first round, like that type of thing. So they've always tried to double dip on positions like that. But yeah, real quick, we'll cover the Steelers and Giants game for Monday Night Football. Um, yeah, I think this might be a bloodbath. If I'm being honest. I don't know if I have
Okay,
faith for
let's
the
calm
Giants
down and
in
not
prime
jinx it.
time.
Goodness gracious. Wow, if there's ever something that's gonna jinx that's it. This is the Mike Tomlin team. You're just asking for a trap. So I will say that what happened in New York raised my expectations and expedited the timeline about where the Steelers are to me right now and what this game means. Because if we come out of this game, it's a close, hard fought, hearty win, that stuff, cool. That means we're not where I was. We need to go into this game and beat the Giants like they're the Giants. That's what we need to do to prove that we are in another tier, because that second half of the season, it's right around the corner. This is all the stuff I've been talking about in articles and on this podcast and other podcasts about, that second half, the brutal half. One game till it happens. One game until everything starts to matter, and that sixth win means more than anything to me. So
yeah,
I'm not worried. I genuinely think the Steelers can win this game. Everything points to Russell Wilson getting better and the guys around him buying. It's not about do we have the ability. We had the ability before. Everyone's buying in more. Not that they didn't trust in Justin Fields. There's just another element. And I think that's what we need to do to prove that we are in another tier, because that second half of the season, it's right around the corner. This is all the stuff I've been talking about in articles and on this podcast about, that second half, the brutal half. One game till it happens. One game until everything starts to matter, and that sixth win means more than anything to me. So
yeah.
that's going on right now, and there's a cohesiveness to it. So you're going to see a better football team, but are you going to see a football team that beats the Giants like they are a legitimate lesser team than you? That's what I want to see. I want people to watch this game and see the disparity between how good the Steelers are and where the Giants are. That's what I want. Because if that happens, I'll be very happy about where we are.
Yeah. I think it's not even just like, oh, I have faith in the Steelers. It's more like Daniel Jones in prime time. Like, it's just never happened. I don't think it's ever going to be a thing. Like I think it's like 0-9 or 0-8 or something. Like, what is it? Oh yeah, it's in Pittsburgh, but still, like, for whatever reason, like that's what I thought last week. Maybe the Giants could compete with Philly a little bit because it's on 1 o'clock. Totally fine.
Yeah,
Nope. Like,
he's
it got even
he's
worse.
1-14 in prime time. For the record,
Yeah.
you were a little one. I didn't know it was that bad.
How generous.
Mike Tomlin is good in prime time. Mike Tomlin likes that prime time
exactly.
lights. So, like I said, I'm not worried about that. But I'm curious from an outsider's perspective because we talked about Kool-Aid a lot. We're drinking quite a bit of Kool-Aid in Pittsburgh this week, and none of us are really ashamed to say it. Cody, from an outside perspective, what does this Monday Night Football game look to people that aren't Steeler or Giants fans?
I mean, I hate to say uninteresting, but man, I'm just like if I learned that Tommy DeVito was going to be quarterback in the New York Football Giants, I'd be a little bit more inclined to watch Daniel Jones struggle. Right? It's just it's so horrible. I feel bad for Malik Neighbors. I mean, their offense is just egregious. Essentially, I know they beat the Seahawks without Malik Neighbors in sort of a one-off win on the West Coast, but man, they're so inconsistent, and there's just kind of some ugliness on that team, and they're just kind of uninteresting. And I mean, I expect the Steelers to take care of business heartily and handily, and we can finally move on to Week 9 after watching that.
Yeah, and Andrew Thomas is probably going to be out again. See, like, what I don't understand is, like, apparently they have this, like, guy, Josh Ednadu, he's going to be their starting left tackle, but they don't move their best offensive lineman to the blind side because, like, he just doesn't want to. And then I think their guard who has tackle experience, they're saying they're not moving him either. But, like, if their offensive line is just terrible without their left tackle, I mean, I think you should, I don't know, consider – what about, their former first-round pick, Evan Neal? Like, he's, like, not even playing. So, yeah, it's going to be a wrap for the Steelers. I don't want to –
really quick, because I gave it a shout-out at an article. I gave it a shout-out at a podcast. I'm going to give this a shout-out everywhere because I was so incredibly wrong. There are very, very few coaches in the NFL that would be willing to make the quarterback change Mike Tomlin did. But there are even fewer coaches that the Sunday morning before the night game he's going to play comes out as like, by the way, it was all me. No one else had any point in this decision. It was all me, all on me, not knowing what the results were going to be. That honestly bought a lot of Tomlin points. There's been a lot of heat, a lot of negativity around Tomlin. I'll talk about whether there was arrogance, about how many hands he had in cookie jars and what that was doing. That specific move and what it did for the team and the fan base and the energy in Pittsburgh, I don't know there's many other coaches in the NFL not named Andy Reid that could do something like that. Mm-hmm. So I just had to give a shout out because I was incredibly wrong when I heard that. I had the opposite reaction I had right now. I was like, the arrogance of how could you? What hands in the air, clutching the pearls. But
you know what other fan base Mike Tomlin's decision really helped out? The Chicago Bears fans, because think about it. There was that point when the Bears had a losing record, right? They're 2-3, and meanwhile Justin Fields, had a winning record. And there's this debate in the Chicago Bears community about like, oh man, look at Justin Fields has a better record than Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick, and oh gosh, did we make the right decision? Oh, Ryan Poles, is he doing a good job as the GM? And it's just like that decision right there. You can be 4-2 as a starting quarterback in the NFL, and you can get benched because you have presented what you have in its full already. So Steelers fans saw the ceiling of Justin Fields, and Mike Tomlin knew. And I love Mike Tomlin. I've always loved Mike Tomlin. Even though I'm not a Steelers fan, I love that guy. I love his press conferences. I love his coaching style. It's old school. I love it. And so for him to come out and just be like, all right, Russ, this is your team. You get the controls. It shows that A, it was a legitimate calf injury that was keeping him out. It wasn't just a coach's decision. And B, Mike Tomlin knows how to read a team, read a room, and he's a great evaluator of talent. And I just kudos to him. I thought that, man, just how do you bench a quarterback when he gets you that far with a record that good to go to Russell Wilson, who's coming off of 2 just terrible years in Denver and 1 bad year in Seattle, and have the faith that he's your guy? I mean, that is just ballsy, and I love it.
It was, and to me, it was kind of like watching an M. Night movie, and because the twist happened, all of a sudden you look back at everything that happened before, you're like, that's what. Because every press conference where he came out and refused to make a definitive decision, Justin's our starter. It's because he knew when Russell was ready, he was going to go to Russell. He's like, I'm not going to tie myself down. I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't care what the fans say. I don't care what the media say. And he was brutalized and in national media for doing that, but he knew he's like, the whole time he's like, I don't what Justin's doing. I know what Justin can do. It's Russell when we're ready. But it was remarkable how it worked out. And now that you get to look back, you're like, oh, I have apologized so much to Mike Tomlin this week.
Well,
I wish I
it
knew him
was
as
a brutal. I mean, it was a brutal quarter and a half, though. There was a quarter and a half of football
awful.
where I was just like, "Uh
Yep.
oh, here we go again." Because I want to see more of a sample size from Russell Wilson, but I am a believer that Russell Wilson has not been the same quarterback since he gift wrapped and put a bow on another Super Bowl for Tom Brady and Bill Belichick when he threw that pick at the goal line. So there's just like this you can just kind of look at his stats and his confidence and his body language as a player. It just kind of like never really recovered fully. But man, if anybody is going to get Russell Wilson right and into the right headspace, around the right people, in the right situation, around a fan base that is just loyal to their core, it's Mike Tomlin. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, I think we're going to see it again. And once we get 3-4 games under our belt with Russell Wilson, we're going to be saying, Justin who? Fields what? What, like it's going to be the universe as it should be. But gutsy call.
Yeah,
I
before
agree.
we,
And
I wanted to
go for it, Andrew.
I wanted to say to close off, Jordan, the resident Giants fan, very not for Daniel Jones. And then Andrew Thomas is out for the year nil, becoming a bust. He did say that Fields didn't play well during the Steelers losses. I mean, that makes sense. Because in those wins, I felt like they were expanding the playbook a little bit, but it was still like I'm not sure like what the ceiling was ever going to be if they kept starting it.
The Steelers 2024 season is about slowly learning what a real NFL team is supposed to look like. We got used to Matt Canada, and we were just pretty much like anyone but Matt Canada. Then we got Arthur Smith, and now we're learning, okay, now time to expect more. What do you need? We had Kenny Pickett, and then we got Justin Fields. We're like, oh, this is so amazing. But then we're like, oh, wait, there's better than this too? We can get better than, and now we got Russell Wilson. And the thing is, there's better than Russell Wilson out there. So we're relearning as a franchise what an NFL offense is supposed to look like in comparison to what we had. It's a slow process, and it takes a lot of knee-jerk reactions and a lot of getting excited about little things. And that's what's going on in Pittsburgh right now. So if people look and they're wondering why Pittsburgh's getting so happy about all these little things, it's because we haven't had little things in a long time. We haven't had pretty things in Pittsburgh on offense for a while. It's been rough. So, but I have to run.
The world's tiniest violin.
I have to run, but I appreciate both of you guys, and I look forward to being on the podcast again soon.
All right, see you, Zach.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll make sure to shout you out later. But real quick, before we move on to fantasy football talk, uh, do you think your Raiders are going to upset the undefeated Chiefs, even though they don't look that unbeatable this year?
Yeah, I mean, Las Vegas doesn't have a home field advantage. That's the one big thing about, when the team moved from Oakland to Vegas. I've been to a game or two there, and it's like you get 50-50, sometimes more in favor of the visiting team than you do, because it's just such a tourist destination. I think the Raiders honestly play better on the road than they do in their own home stadium. If this game was at Arrowhead, I might have a little bit more faith that the Raiders could pull off a
Wow.
pretty big upset. But being in Vegas and kind of smelling that maybe Antonio Pierce is losing the locker room a little bit. You got Aiden O'Connell out for 4 to 6 weeks. Gardner Minshew's back in. They signed Desmond Ritter. It's looking pretty grim on offense. So it's kind of up to that defense. Can they get a turnover? Can they get a pick six? I don't see it happening. I don't see the Raiders covering the spread either.
Yeah, and then kind of in a similar notion, do you think the Cowboys will bounce back from their brutal loss before their bye week to the hobbled Niners on Sunday Night Football?
I think it's going to be an interesting game to watch. I do sort of historically like appreciate Mike McCarthy as an old school football coach, and it's sort of like been hard for him to transition to sort of the new look NFL and what that labor agreement looks like with the players union and all the changes and such. But they got too much talent to be that mediocre, especially on their receiving core and on offense. They still have a pretty good offensive line. So I think if they can establish a run with Rico Dowdle, control the clock a little bit, and find CeeDee Lamb over the top instead of these short routes they've been hitting CeeDee Lamb on, like earlier in the year, if they can get him loose, if they can get him some one-on-one coverage and some formations and get him over the top, I think they can bounce back. I also think it's a good bounce back spot for the Niners too. So, yeah, get your popcorn ready for this game. I don't really know why the Niners are 4-point favorites, but I think it's going to be a close game, maybe a little bit closer than that.
This may be early to talk about the draft, but I mean, do you think the Colorado quarterback might fit for the Raiders if they do get a draft pick high enough for them?
Yeah, Sanders coming in. I don't know. I don't. I haven't watched enough game tape of Sanders, I guess, to know like if is he like a transcendent talent, or does he just play in kind of a weaker
Yeah.
conference and have a famous father? I don't know. I just hope that whatever happens in the draft, that due diligence is done by the Raiders front office. I hope that Tom Brady is sort of a steadying factor in that front office for business
Yeah.
decisions. So I don't think they're just going to jump at a big name like maybe they would have in the past. But we'll see. We'll see how much influence Tom Brady can have, and if they'll listen to him. And who knows? Maybe he's going to be terrible front office person. Who knows? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of like picturing like when they just decided to sign Gardner Minshew and then hope that the competition between him and O'Connell would play itself out. I mean,
Yeah.
it just screamed draft 2025 for a quarterback. But yeah, let's get
Yep.
to the quarterbacks for fantasy this week. Um, and yeah, I mean, you're basically starting your main guys. Lamar. I wish I had more shares of my own favorite team quarterback from fantasy. I only have him in like one league, but man, Lamar Jackson, he might be able to take you to a fantasy title, like him and Derrick Henry alone. if you have any of those guys.
Oh yeah, I
But
mean Lamar Jackson, he's leading all fantasy players in points right now, I believe, especially in leagues if you get 6 points for passing touchdowns. But yeah, and then Derrick Henry is right behind him at number 5. So like this is overall fantasy points over all the positions in PPR leagues. I mean it's wild the weapons that they have and how they're utilizing them so perfectly. How did you feel about their win over the Bucks for fantasy purposes, and what do you see moving forward with the Ravens schedule?
yeah, it was pretty encouraging. I mean, their defense isn't, but that could be a good thing because then they're going to have to put up points very early. And it's kind of interesting. Like, you would think, like, some fantasy quarterbacks or players would be game scripted and, like, oh, you need all this time to get enough points. But I mean, they've shown they could do it in 3 quarters. You know, it was Lamar Jackson, I think, fifth, Jackson five, with 5 total touchdowns. He could he could do that again against Cleveland. I think maybe it would just depend on if Jameis can keep them in it long enough. We'll see how long that goes, but yeah, for fantasy for sure, it's been beneficial. Yeah, I kind of have. I want to know a name for you at quarterback who could potentially be one of the potential starts of the week this week.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the kind of the top 10 guys, I guess, are pretty chalk. So I'm kind of looking a little bit farther down the list here. So I think
Yeah,
there's a player that's ranked, really low, and it's a name that we're used to seeing, over the past couple years, pretty high. I think Dak Prescott needs to have a signature game where he takes command of this team, puts them on his shoulders, and says, "All right, fellas, I'm going to take you to the promised land of victory." I think that they can get after this 49ers defense a little bit. It's just they're showing week in and week out that they're not as formidable as they used to be. They had a bye week to get some things right, do some soul searching, put together a game plan. I think Mike McCarthy, he's another one of those coaches, kind of like Sean McVay. His record coming off a bye week is really good. Andy
oh
Reid's
yeah,
another coach like that. So I think for me, it's Dak Prescott in a get right game here with CeeDee Lamb, and he gets the tight ends involved there in Dallas. Ferguson, he'd be my start of the week.
yeah. I don't have the guts to do it in my own league where I have him, but I actually think Drake May against even the Jets team. I mean, I've the past 2 weeks he's had over 20 fantasy points. I think. Um, I think he's mobile enough, and he's shown that he's more aggressive downfield than anything Jacoby Brissett was with the same amount of talent. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a consistent force in fantasy. Maybe I wouldn't start him like over like the normal starters. Like, for example, I have like Jared Goff and Drake May. I definitely would just go with the safer option with Goff there, but yeah, I think his development has been pretty surprising because I thought this guy was like they were saying, oh, he's like week like months away from playing. They probably should have just played him week 1, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, they probably should have. He's looked pretty good in his handful of starts he's had. Um, I like the call. I mean, I think the Jets defense, if they can start getting some of their secondary back and getting healthy. I haven't looked at their injury report yet this week because I haven't thought about starting Drake May in fantasy until you just brought it up. But yeah, I like the call. And similarly, I suppose if you want to play some YOLO ball, maybe take a flyer on a daily slate, or if you're sitting at 0-7 or 1-6, maybe 2-5, and you want to do a dart throw start at quarterback, why not roll Jameis Winston out there? I mean, he's a
Yeah, that
gunslinger.
too.
He's going to chuck the rock. He's going to probably throw 3 picks, but I mean, he could also have 4 touchdowns, maybe 5 if they get into a shootout with the Ravens. I mean, they're going to make him pay eventually, the Ravens defense. I mean, they made Baker Mayfield pay last week, and he's gunslinger mentality quarterback as well. But, I mean, why not take a flyer on Jameis against the Ravens? What do you think about that?
Yeah, the Ravens defense has had just it's not even like a talent issue with their secondary. It's more like there's just miscommunication all over the field. So yeah, that totally could happen. A broken play on the Browns end of things, and yeah, they've in the Bucks game they dropped. I know Marlon Humphrey got 2 picks, but some of their other players they had chances to catch interceptions as well, and it just didn't happen. So yeah, over guys like Aaron Rodgers and like Anthony Richardson, I'm just not in on those guys. Um, I thought about Bo Nix against Carolina, but at the same time, like it's kind of similar with Rodgers. They just utilize the run game a lot more. That I don't think that they're going to be too viable. They're not going to have the fantasy upside that you're going to be wanting um, for this week.
Yeah, and if the Broncos end up getting up big, because you got Bryce Young going back under center for the Panthers because Andy Dalton got in a car wreck and hurt his thumb or something, it could get out of hand quick. And I mean, maybe it's a situation where they pull their starters. I mean, I don't know. I don't like that matchup for that offense going against the Broncos defense that's catching their stride and looking really good. So. Yeah, I would be weary of that start.
Yeah, I guess in the same vein, I'd be pretty aggressive on Javonte Williams this week against the Carolina Panthers defense. I
Yeah,
mean, usually after the two running backs have gone there against that defense. So yeah, I would just wherever he is. I know there's a lot of like pretty big names that um, you probably start regardless, but just find a way to throw him in the flex maybe, or as an
yeah,
RB
it could
two
be
for
a
sure.
huge day for even Jaleel McLaughlin too. I mean,
Mhm.
especially if they start benching starters, if that game gets out of hand, or if they're just trying to run out the clock and get everybody going home. Yeah, Broncos running backs probably both fair to good starts this week.
Yeah. What's another name you're looking at running back? It's kind of tough this week because you're probably going to be starting 2 or maybe even 3 of like the top 20 guys. Um, but yeah, I have one other name, but we can have yours.
Yeah, I think Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals is kind of starting to come around a little bit. He's getting more of a snap share over Zach Moss, and he just kind of looks the part when you watch that offense. So if they want to be able to compete with Philadelphia, they're going to have to run the football a little bit. So I like Chase Brown to have a touchdown in this one, some catches out of the backfield as well, and that might be more of where his fantasy points come from is kind of some of them short catches out of the backfield as opposed to rushing yards. But he's a guy I could see outplaying his top or his 24th overall ranking for running back this week.
Yeah, I guess in the same vein, I mentioned earlier, like Rashad White will probably be probably a little bit ranked higher after if Bucky Irving misses. I'm surprised they still have. I know he's going to get the work, but Chuba Hubbard here because number one is against the Denver Broncos defense, and number two, like Bryce Young's the starting quarterback. So we saw how that went. Um, so yeah, I definitely start some of these other guys. But yeah, I guess the one name I want to talk on, I probably wouldn't play him, but man, I am hoping ETN just doesn't play because I feel like Tank Bigsby would just shoot right up if ETN was out.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I like me some Tank Bigsby for sure. The matchup I don't love against Green Bay, but if he gets the usage with ETN out, um, Definitely got to like him a lot more. I'm a little bit surprised to see Alvin Kamara ranked at 17th overall. I didn't know news recently came out that he's been playing through a broken hand and also a cracked rib. So I guess in that sense, knowing how hurt he's been and how bad that offense looks without Rashid Shaheed and without Derek Carr in there,
Yeah, with
still
Spencer
on
Rattler and
opportunity and usage alone, I feel like Alvin Kamara should probably be ranked a little bit higher because he seems to always find a way to play through those injuries.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, he kind of jumped off at me a little bit. DeAndre Swift at 14 versus Washington. I could see him outperforming that ranking as well. He's had 3 really good weeks heading into the bye. For all-purpose yards, he's been in right around that 120 yards, all-purpose yards, and a couple touchdowns. A touchdown or two per game in there. So, I mean, coming off of a bye and trying to ground and pound a little bit, control the clock against Washington, could see DeAndre Swift cracking the top 10.
Yeah, for sure. I guess in the same game, what do you think about DJ Moore this week coming off the bye? Well, I guess like that whole Bears trio with Keenan Allen coming on and Roma Dunze having a few games here and there that have been pretty solid for fantasy.
Yep, I think the Chicago Bears offense moving forward is going to be a tremendous real-world NFL offense, and I think it's going to be kind of rather frustrating for fantasy managers because in the game against
Yeah,
Jacksonville in Week 6 before they went into the bye week, I mean, Caleb Williams was just painting tight end Cole Kmet and Keenan Allen with targets. And you just don't know if it's going to be a big game for DJ Moore, if it's going to be Roma Dunze, or if it's going to be those two in the middle of the football field. So, man, it's kind of as the overall offense improves for the Chicago Bears as the season wears on, it kind of like might take down like DJ Moore's fantasy value a little bit. Whereas like we kind of had him up here to start the year, I can kind of see him sort of settle in that mid-tier boom or bust type start on a weekly basis. But if we had Jaden Daniels and we knew it was going to be a little bit more of an offensive battle, then maybe I say yes, DJ Moore over the top. I like it. Until we know who the quarterback's going to be for the Commanders, I'm kind of having a little bit of pause with him.
yeah. I guess this is gonna be dependent on if Zay Flowers actually plays this week. He's been DNP with practice with that ankle injury. If he's a no-go, I know the Browns have pretty good corners. I would consider elevating Rashad Bateman. We're back in it finally. He's been coming on, and he had that big blow-up game last week. Yeah, he's around like all three of these guys. Like I could definitely like Tillman, like you said earlier, McMillan, Bateman. They could all rise up in these rankings for sure. What's another name that you're into for receivers?
Cedric Tillman, man, same game, other
Yeah,
team. I think Cedric Tillman has a connection with Jameis Winston, and he's got a heck of a lot of talent too. So Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman are good wide receivers. After the Browns traded away Amari Cooper, so they're going to throw the ball. They're going to have to throw the ball quick because that offensive line, holding up in protection against the Ravens front. So I like Cedric Tillman this week to definitely outperform a 49th overall ranking.
yeah. What are your thoughts on? I know this was a big talking point last week or the past few weeks, but Marvin Harrison Jr. Hasn't really gone off like he did in week 2. Do you think that could continue, or do you think he could have a potential spike week against the Dolphins?
Oh man, I don't think it's going to happen against the Dolphins. He's probably going to see a fair amount of Jalen Ramsey, and the quality targets just haven't been there in the last several weeks. James Conner and Kyler Murray are both running the football well. I think you can attack this Dolphins defense on the ground as well. So I don't think he's going to have a breakout game this week. But I still am not out on him for the rest of the season. I do think that, getting into week 9, week 10, somewhere in there, that there's going to be a little bit of a click. And particularly if the Cardinals can scrap out a couple wins here, I do think that they can go into Miami and get a win this week. And then they're going to be playing the Bears in Arizona next week. And I would love to have the storyline of Bears coming off of a big win on the road in Washington, the Cardinals coming off of a big road in Miami, and they're having a showdown in the desert. But I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. can turn it around. He has all the physical tools that we know of, and they got to figure some things out with that offense. Play calling, I don't know if it's just attitude or what they're trying to work through right now, because we've seen it. The talent is there, and it looked really, really good when it was clicking. After what we saw in week 2 out of Marvin Harrison Jr., I was like, oh, here we go. It was like he's going to be going off to the moon type of thing. Hasn't happened. And when it really looks that good and passes the eye test, and then it just falls off of a cliff, you got to wonder why, because it's just hard to put a finger on it. So temper expectations for him this week. I don't like him the following week against the Bears, but I do think he'll get right and perform towards the end of the season. Probably just not up to how high fantasy managers had to draft him as a rookie.
Right. Yeah. So we have Terry falling a little bit, Deontay Johnson. That makes sense because, if we got backup quarterback, I mean, I guess you can call Bryce Young a backup quarterback now, but we have backup quarterback coming in. I'm not sure how they'll improve their fantasy stock. I'm surprised that Devonta Smith. When he plays with AJ Brown, it's just not been good. So I'm not sure if you can trust him any more than like potential flex option. I know Tank Dell gave managers a 0 last week, but it is against the Colts, so yeah.
Yeah,
One last,
I think
yeah,
Devontae Smith is one of the biggest disappointments on the fantasy season for wide receivers so far. I mean, it was really
yeah,
sky high expectations for him, and then even right before the season started, when they brought in Jahan Dotson out of Washington as kind of like that final third wide receiver that the Philadelphia Eagles offense has been missing for the past couple years. Thought maybe it would open up some targets for those guys, and it's just not been there. It has been Saquon and AJ Brown and not much else.
right. Before we go to tight end, DK Metcalf probably gonna miss a game, maybe 2. We'll see. Do you think JSN, Tyler Lockett, do you think they're gonna potentially have a boom week, or is it gonna be kind of more of the same?
Well, the Buffalo defense is pretty good. They are playing at home, which is better than going on the road and playing in Orchard Park. So I love the talent for JSN. I feel like he's a good team player. And if anybody's going to step out, well, DK has to miss some time. Why not be the young fella, right? Tyler Lockett, he's still going to do Tyler Lockett things. It's just at a different pace. Now he's gotten to be a little bit older. But yeah, I'd say probably like Noah Fant or JSN probably to sort of pick up a few more targets. And it's going to be Kenneth Walker all day, every day in that game. So get him rolling out. I don't think I would start Zach Charbonnet even at a flex in a deep league. I think Kenneth Walker's been a little bit too dominant with the touches there. But yeah, I would say JSN over Lockett in this game. And if you need a dart throw at tight end, maybe try Noah Fant if DK's out. He's another big body guy that can go up and get a couple 50-50 balls. Like, he doesn't have the speed for real downfield stuff, but high throws over the middle of the field. Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick on tight ends, it seems the position is totally back except Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid. Hold up, there's one of well, actually, basically they're all back. I know Ferguson had a not the best game before the bye week, but yeah, and we got the return of Mark Andrews. I'll talk about that. I think that's kind of. I don't know because he's not totally dominating the tight end reps yet. It's still, I think Kolar is maybe kind of falling out of the pecking order. He's seeing like maybe one or two catches here and there, but um, I would just temper expectations on getting like two touchdown games from Andrews every week, or but he every week he definitely can score a touchdown, so that's worth starting for sure. Is there
Yep.
another tight end that sticks out on this list?
Yeah, I mean, until we have a reason not to buy in, Cole Kmet is a starting tight end in fantasy football. So for him to be ranked at 12, I mean that's a starter in 12 team leagues, but I kind of like to see him in the top 10. Who you take out? It's hard to choose who you take out. I mean, there's some weeks where you take out Kelsey. There's definitely weeks where you take out Kyle Pitts. So I kind of get it through that lens. There's some weeks where he's
Yeah.
outperformed, Trey McBride. Pretty much the only tight end that doesn't get outperformed is Brock Bowers. And it's not for a ton of yardage, but he's getting a ton of catches. So he's a PPR
Oh yeah.
beast. And, breaking league records for rookie tight ends in the first 7 games. I mean, that's fun to see. But yeah,
I think
I mean,
the name you could take out potentially to swap is Tucker Kraft. I saw that touchdown. That should not have been a touchdown. I don't know how that wasn't picked off in the end. That was
yeah,
such a
that was
fluky.
close.
Yeah, that was
That was a weird one.
fluky
And
play.
what about Dalton
Um,
Kincaid?
real,
He was a tight end that probably got drafted pretty high because we're all thinking before the fantasy season started, who's Josh Allen going to throw the football to? And Dalton
yeah,
Kincaid
I
was
don't
at
think.
the top of pretty much everybody's list. So, do you think that having Amari Cooper is going to be helpful to sort of take some defensive eyeballs off of Kincaid, or do you think we're just going to continue to see him struggle for the rest of the season?
I just think the addition of Amari Cooper, it kind of just makes that whole offense just like it's just so spread out everywhere. It's just going to be hard to know who. It's going to be um, kind of like maybe like the Niners or the Chiefs. They just have so many options. Um, even like Khalil Shakir, he was kind of a consistent player, but now it's going to be very tough to figure out. Like it'll be like the Packers. That's a very easy example because
Yeah.
Tucker Craft can give you nothing or he can give you a touchdown. You never know. Um, but yeah, real quick, we got a question from question Puka coming off of IR and slated to play. Should he flex him over Aaron Jones? That is, I don't know if I would do that. I just think Aaron Jones is eating in that offense right now. That would be a very risky play.
Yeah,
But we
I
have
think
seen, yeah,
the Rams defense, like they're the defense that got the Bears offense going right. So they played in week 4, and that's when DeAndre Swift went off on the ground and catching balls out of the backfield. That's one area you can really exploit that Rams defense. So I would say
mhm.
you got to roll Aaron Jones tonight. Puka, love to see him back. You got to get him in your lineups. But if Cooper Kupp goes tonight, we got to see who's the healthiest, who are they going to be game planning for on offense and getting the football. So I would definitely roll AJ over Puka tonight.
Yeah. Speaking of tonight's game, I'm kind of surprised they have the Vikings kicker ranked third. I would have. Well, I don't know if you saw, but Aubrey may or may not play due to jury duty. I think he's gonna play for that night game. But yeah, who are some kickers or the kicker you're rolling with? They have your guy Cyber down a little bit, but that's probably because of the Mariota factor in there.
Yep, and the Chicago defense, but that could also bode well in his favor too. If the Bears defense keep him out of the end zone, it's still a prolific offense, and he's been accurate so far this year. So if you've been riding the Siebert train with me, congratulations, it's paid off so far. We might have to temper expectations a little bit this week. So another guy that I like this week, and I always like to pick up a kicker and roll them for a couple weeks, because I feel like when you start streaming kickers, just pick one up, start him that week, drop him, pick up another one, and it's a lot of movement. And sometimes you got to catch a kicker when they're riding a wave of confidence or game script that kind of like weaves a narrative throughout a string of games, right? So
Right.
I really like Chris Boswell against the Giants. You
Oh,
know that
yeah.
Steelers offense is going to go crazy, right? And he's been an outstandingly accurate kicker. So, give me the Boswell incident to be the number one kicker in Week 8.
If I'm being honest, I picked him up week 1, and I haven't had to move kickers in the league that I have him in all that often, if at all, this whole year. So yeah, I
Good for
would.
you. That was a week he
Yeah,
put up like 26 points, wasn't it, as a kicker?
yeah, yeah. He's
Yeah,
like
that was
on
crazy.
terms of like consistency. He's like up there with Aubrey, Fairbairn. I think Koo and Bucker have been pretty consistent. I'm pretty sure, but yeah, he's up
Yep.
there, and they always rank him
Yeah.
for whatever reason out of the top 5, but he just ends up putting up double digits every week, and that's what you want really. But yeah, for defense, I think the obvious is the Broncos defense against Bryce Young. Good luck with that one for Carolina. I mean,
Oh
I don't
man.
know. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
rough go.
I'm in a really deep league, and it's a league where I choose to stream defenses. It's a rough life if you're in a 14 team or bigger
Oh yeah,
league streaming defenses. But this week, I'm kind of going with just a gut call here. It's that Arizona Cardinals defense against the Miami Dolphins in Miami. And on paper, historically, you're probably like, that's probably a horrible call. But Tua hasn't been practicing, and rust is real. And especially if you have a brain injury, that affects your motor skills. So I don't think Tua is going to be particularly sharp. I don't think it's just all of a sudden the Dolphins' offense is back to normal. I think that there's some turnovers to be had here, and the Arizona Cardinals special teams already has one kick return for a touchdown so far this year. So special teams being a big factor of the defense special teams. Give me the Cardinals in a dart throw this week if you're looking for some upside.
right. For defense, it's more like you're just banking on turnovers, and
Yeah.
like the Dolphins potentially winning in a shootout still can happen even with a few turnovers or like one or two in the game. So like both things can still be true. So yeah, I don't mind that call at all. Um, I guess another dart throw I'll throw if they kind of pulled through last week for DFS like, against the Raiders. It's the Rams defense tonight. I mean, it is risky for sure. So I would definitely not start him over like most of these defenses, but Darnold has kind of been a little bit more turnover prone the last few weeks, so I
Yep.
wouldn't be surprised if the Rams got a turnover or two.
Yeah, and if they had a couple weeks to game plan for this team and they kind of see some tendencies that the Vikings have been having on offense, and if they can jump those tendencies, I mean, all it takes is one pick six to have your DST hit, really, no matter what they give up. So, uh, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna do it for Total Apex Sports on the fourth and goal. Where can they find your work, Cody?
Yeah, I'm on X, Cody _from _MT. And on Insta, I'm at Scenic42.
Yeah. We got to shout out Zach on Twitter, Francis and Zach. He's the Steelers beat writer. But yeah, follow us at Total Epic Sports. We have fantasy, gaming, entertainment, you name it. But